welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Diana Gogan. She shared her story of quickly riding up the corporate ladder only to find she compromised her values and her spirit. I'm María Tomás-Keegan, and this is From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Tips for the Transition. I'm honored to share inspiring stories like Diana's. These are stories of reaching out and rising up because they help us to know that we're not alone in this life journey. Other people have gone before us, and we can learn from them. Thank you, Diana, for letting us see behind the mask you wore. I'd like to focus on the emotions you were feeling during that time and since. What did it feel like to stuff down those emotions and just keep plowing through day by day? And how did you discover that it helps when you allow the emotions to surface?
Really powerful questions. And I'm sure that there are many who recognize and feel this, and maybe are going through this right now. You know, when getting up every morning and facing the day, I would just dread the alarm going off in the morning. I found comfort in my routine, but what I found was happening in the routine is I began to just prepare, armor up, shove those things down, and it's very heavy. Any joy that I might have woken up with in the morning, like the dog was licking my face, was quickly replaced by this, all right, tough it up, here we go. And it was just really heavy. It's like carrying an extra, 100 or 500 pounds of weight. And not only that, there was a lot of emotion around not being who I was. And I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't really understand what that meant. I lived in a very logical world, and none of this inside stuff was anything that I really paid a lot of attention to. But I could tell there was something inside of me that was off, that was wrong. There was that, the voice, the expression, something was just dying, and I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even have a language for it, but it felt horrible. And so that put me into this, well, what's wrong with me? And, speculating about all the possible psychoses and health issues and things that could be wrong with me. It's like, well, I can't let anybody know about that. So you just keep putting barriers around, and more questions and doubts and things I had in myself just added more layers onto a really already toxic practice of emotionally stuffing things in. And, that of course led to needing an outlet from time to time. And sometimes that was me just wigging out, just flipping out. Sometimes it was eating. Sometimes, it was drinking. Sometimes it was whatever that is. Even exercise. At that point, I exercised a lot, but it wasn't necessarily a healthful exercise. It was just that space where I could just let it all out, and I didn't have to say a word about it, or I didn't have to really feel it. I could just let it loose. And before, it didn't take long before that became the new norm, and I forgot what life was like before. And as I thought about, well, what could I do differently? It's like, well, I don't want to change anything, and I don't want to admit that I can't handle this, or I'm not tough enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I can't make a go of it. At that time I was making more money than my husband. And so when he asked me, what is the choice you want to make? It was like, well, I want the marriage, but how in the world are we going to do that? So in addition to stuffing all of that in, there was now that concern and that doubt and letting go of what I had been raised as security.
And a sense of responsibility for
right?
Oh,
absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because yes, that there's a huge sense of responsibility, a lot of which at this point, looking back, I realized was made up in my head.
Yeah. And what about the guilt?
Oh, the guilt was, I failed.
Yeah.
I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I was a fraud. I've let people down. I've let me down, but it felt kind of good. So that was a little confusing, making the different choices. But the guilt was actually just as heavy, I think, if not more heavy than shoving it all in. Fortunately, my husband was like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. I had nothing to transition to, and he was all on board about figuring that out, which really kind of cracked the door on a very dark, deep cell that I had put myself in. And I saw the light for the first time, and I had no idea what the light was. I had no idea where it led to, but it also gave breath to that part of my soul that I didn't know was being crushed. I didn't know existed within me. I didn't know there was any other way of self-expression other than working really hard, and making a name for yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting that you share that part of the story. We are conditioned, I believe, when we are growing up and we go through high school, and then we're groomed to go to college, and we're groomed to then have, at least in our era, I think it's changing now, but there are a lot more entrepreneurial spirits in the younger generation, I think, that they see another way, but there wasn't another acceptable way for us, right?
No.
How many times did you hear, oh, you shouldn't do that you can't make any money at that?
And there was that, either you had a career, at least in my mind at that point, I won't blanket this for everybody, it was either you have a successful career or you stay home and raise a family.
Yeah.
And a lot of women did both. Right. But it was that career where you really got noticed, and you were expected once you started that to be able to handle both really well.
Right. So how did you overcome all of those emotions that were flying at you when your husband helped you crack open that armor that you were wearing, the mask, and you started to see some light, and you weren't quite sure what it was? I'm sure that was pretty scary. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of emotions around that kind of probably just like Pandora's box flew out of that.
Oh, it was. And there was, not only was it the recent emotions, but it was like you talked about, it was that guilt and was that wonder. And it's like, how am I going to survive? And on all that doubt, and I don't know anything else. And, the disappointment and the shame of what that looks like. And the only thing I had to go on at that time, because I didn't know myself, I didn't trust myself, is I had to trust in somebody else's belief and faith in me. And that, again, I felt myself putting a lot of pressure on, because, okay, now what if this fails? What if I don't live up to this expectation? And so it wasn't, the saving grace. It actually created more voices and more demons, if you will, and doubt about that. But I realized very quickly that the only thing that would change anything is if I took action and tried something. Hmm. And that's what, thankfully, my husband kept saying is, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And you can always go back. And so we had done some real estate investing at that point. And so it was like, well, maybe I'll go into real estate. Maybe I'll focus on that part and perhaps get my license. And it was like, all right, that was a little scary. I knew I could do it. I knew the tenacity and the focus and the determination it took me to get to where I was. And those were already skills that I had. And then so as I began to start seeing what I could do versus what I didn't want to do anymore, that started to shift things.
I love that you said that, because it's so important. It's what I work on with clients a lot, and that is getting past the fear of stepping beyond your comfort zone and taking some action, giving it a try, giving something a try, and then stepping back and evaluating from there. It is, action is, there is no faith without action. So faith in yourself requires you taking some action, and having someone with faith in you to be your backbone for a bit and kind of push you forward, recognizing that you have the skills and the talent, and it just requires a little faith in yourself. Taking that action is the most important first step. I love that you said that. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's the bravest and the hardest step sometimes to take.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
So I am very eager to hear what you're going to share in our next segment, Diana. If we are paying attention on our journey, there are beautiful lessons that we learn. Mm-hmm. And I want you to talk about reconnecting with yourself, how to let those emotions be heard, and finding your path and your purpose. So I invite everyone to stay tuned for the next segment with Diana. I'm María Tomás-Keegan. Till next time.